Hi and welcome back. Today's lecture is going to cover some fundamental elements of strategy for answering questions in the most efficient way possible on the SAT. Unlike regular high school, no partial credit is given on the SAT. This means that all you need to be focused on is getting the right answer. No one cares how you got it, or even if you really know anything about the concepts at hand. All you need to be able to do on any problem is select the right answer choice. And on multiple choice questions, knowing what answer choices are wrong is almost worth as much as knowing which one is right. On the SAT, hard questions are worth the same number of points as easy ones. So it's absolutely imperative that you get as many of the easiest questions right as possible, instead of spending more time on hard questions that aren't worth the effort. The scoring scale on the SAT can be a bit finicky at times. So treat every question as a precious opportunity to improve your score. Although you don't want to waste too much time on questions that aren't worthwhile, you may still be able to improve your score by investing your time efficiently on techniques that can give you points without wasting time. On the SAT, every student has a unique ideal pace. This is because every student is different. Questions that take you mere seconds to solve may demand longer efforts from others. But your target score will also help to define your ideal approach and pacing to the test. This slide can help give you a general idea of how many questions you can allow yourself to leave blank, depending on your score. Take a minute and figure out how many questions you should be skipping based on your personal target score. During your initial approach through a section on the SAT, keep an eye out for questions that may cost you too much time or ones that you consider too difficult or costly to solve. When you come upon a question like this, mark it as skipped. So once you've completed a run-through of all the questions that are easy for you, you may return to this and other questions that you have initially avoided. This method will ensure that you maximize your score by avoiding spending too much time on questions that just aren't worth it. During your initial approach through a section, you can also mark questions where you aren't totally certain about the answer that you've selected, so that after you've answered every question that you can, you may return to these questions and give them another go-around. We should also note that if you're scoring 700 or above on a given section, you should simply proceed through the test and attempt every question, as the principles of skipping do not apply to you. The most difficult part of initially skipping questions is knowing which ones you should skip. An important aspect of your prep will be learning to identify questions that are too difficult and questions that cost you too much time. Try to be realistic with yourself. If you know that a question is going to be too tough for you, then don't be stubborn about trying to solve it. Set your pride aside for the sake of your score and delay the question until the second run through. You can develop an ego once you score 2,400 and get into Harvard. Getting to know your SAT self will greatly help you recognize what types of problems are currently out of your range and what types of problems take you too long. Becoming familiar with your personal strengths and weaknesses can go a long way towards improving your score. And our software's analytical tools will be actively making recommendations for you, so you're constantly in tune with your ideal strategy. You can increase your knowledge of your personal strengths and weaknesses through three primary methods. The first is understanding the order of difficulty of each section as designed by the test makers. This information is outlined in detail in each one of the subject's introductory lectures, which you can access at any time. The second way is simply by using and absorbing the information that we give you. Our sophisticated algorithms are designed specifically to tell you exactly what you should or shouldn't be working on at any time. The third and most important way for you to develop your difficulty recognition skills is the time-tested technique of practice, practice, practice. This is really the most important tool that you have at your disposal when it comes to combating the test maker's tricks. Each subject has its own optimum skipping strategy. On the math section, you may simply skip according to the difficulty of each question. And the same goes for writing for the most part. The reading, however, is slightly difficult because we recommend that you skip reading comprehension passages based on the difficulty of the passage, not of the individual question. We'll cover these ideas in more detail during the strategy lectures that pertain to each individual section as well. Okay, so let's talk about this general approach in a little bit more detail. During your first run-through of a section on the SAT, mark the questions that you choose to initially skip, so that you can come back to them during a second time around. The fact that you've chosen to initially delay answering a question does not mean that you abandon it. It just means that you're giving the easiest questions on a section the highest priority. During your first run through an SAT section, make sure you give yourself enough time to come back to the questions that you've initially skipped. This amount of time may vary depending on how many questions you choose to skip, but don't be afraid to skip some. Even if you only answer half the questions during your first run, that's fine, as long as you leave enough time for the second run through. That simply means that you have effectively prioritized your order of difficulty. Make sure you keep a close eye on your clock or stopwatch so that you can manage your time effectively. So once you've completed your first run, it's time to go back to the questions that you've skipped. Try to be ruthless and efficient during your second run. If you discover that you're forced to guess on a question, then just do it. Don't dawdle. Use your techniques of elimination to the best of your ability, cross off as many bad answers as you can, then guess and go. And if you finish early on a section, don't just sit and wait for the next section to come rolling around. Use every available second you have to check your work, rework tough problems, or eliminate more answer choices. You can bet the top scorers are using every second they have, so you should too. Okay, that's pretty much it for our lecture on general skipping and answering strategy. Use your target score to determine your ideal pace, then try to follow this guideline on your practice tests. Make sure you mark and skip the questions which are difficult or costly for you, complete your first run through a section, then come back and try to get through the tough ones. Okay, good luck and see you next time.